felt like I was kind of unconsciously doing what I thought I was supposed to do, which included be successful, make money, look good, do all the things that, I think a lot of society programs us to do. And I was just doing that. I was kind of living into this programming that I got in childhood, from society, from wherever else I picked it up. And the shift was really deciding I actually wanted to live into my own life that I authored, that wasn't about any programming. And then, that kind of set me on a whole path of discovery and learning and looking at, really tough stuff to be able to then say, okay, now what do I want to create and how?
Welcome back to The Thermostat with Jason Barger. If you're currently on a commute, a walk, or just a micro break in your day, glad you're making time to step back, to think, and to reflect on the next steps on your journey. I've never been more convinced. The best leaders and team cultures in the world are the ones that make time to step back and calibrate their thermostat. I hope today's conversation leaves you feeling grounded and inspired. Now let's dive into today's topic to engage our minds and hearts in order to authentically lead and create compelling cultures wherever we are in the world. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the podcast. It's Jason here, and we are in 2021. We got through 2020. 2020 certainly was a challenging year, as we all know, for so many different reasons: the global pandemic, social unrest, issues of social justice, political uncertainty, economic uncertainty. And then where the heck are we going to send our kids to school? Are you at home? Are you online? Are you, what is it that we're doing? So there's been a lot that's swirling in the world. And of course, we know that 2021 is here, but all of those challenges aren't behind us. So wherever you are and however you're coming to this podcast today, thanks for tuning in, and glad that this is a place again for you, as always, to step back and to hopefully have something that gives you a little juice, fills your mind and your heart with some positivity, helps you step back and think about how you're showing up in the world and the culture that you're creating with the people around you. So thanks to everybody who's been along for the journey so far. Seasons 1, 2, and 3 have gotten fabulous reviews, and thanks to everybody who has rated, reviewed, commented, all those ways in which we amplify the podcast in the world today. So thanks for everybody that takes the time to do that. And now we're at season 4. So I am very excited to bring in my guest for today. In just a minute, I'm going to bring in my guest. But what I first want to say is it had been a number of years that people around had been telling me that I needed to, connect with Brett Kaufman. And shout out to Christy Eckert. It was one of those people. But also many other people in my circles had been saying, hey, I couldn't believe that we didn't know each other. And I don't know why it took so long for us to know each other. But I'm excited to have Brett joining in just a second. I'm excited. I get a chance to have thought leaders from across the country and around the world on this podcast. And so excited when that happens from literally across the country and all around the world. And even cooler then when it happens in my own backyard in Columbus, Ohio. So I'm excited to invite in Brett Kaufman, who I'll give the official kind of intro to him first, is the founder and CEO of Kaufman Development. And over the course of 20 years has developed, leased, or sold over 10,000 different kinds of properties. He's been involved in all kinds of different philanthropic organizations and work throughout the communities as well. But more importantly, to the work that he's done, what's been most interesting to me is I think not only has he been successful in all of that development work, but certainly the way that he's thought about the goal, and I'm going to even read this to you, to be a builder of conscious communities, believing that success comes easiest when working from one's highest and best self. This has motivated his work to be centered around mental health, well-being, and creative expression. Brett's vision of creating spaces that provide healthy, sustainable, and holistically supportive environments for people to work and live led to the founding of Kaufman Development in 2011, and has really changed the real estate development landscape and one of the country's fastest growing cities, which is our home of Columbus, Ohio. So, Brett, with that, welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, thanks, Jason. I really appreciate it. It's great to be with you. It is kind of hard to believe we didn't know each other until recently. I, like you, had had a lot of people saying we should, and it finally happened, thanks to Christy, and really enjoyed having you on my podcast. And just looking at the map behind you and the all you need is love and your opening statement. And I'm just reminded of your story and what you're doing and what you're doing with all of your work. And it's a privilege to share some time with you.
Well, thank you. Thanks for being here. I get to kind of return this flip the switch here, because I was on your podcast, the Gravity podcast, which is a great podcast, by the way. For anybody out there listening, you ought to check it out. And really, actually, in the interview that you did with me, it was one of those where you were asking me all these questions about my life and growing up and how I, really interesting, great questions, and gave me the chance to reflect and tell some stories that I don't know whether I've told in other places, and or certainly I don't reflect on or talk about a whole lot. Usually when I'm doing these kind of interviews, we're talking about developing people and culture and teams and all that kind of stuff. And so it was really fun to do that episode with you. And now I get to turn the spotlight around and put it on you a little bit and share you with the listeners today. I'm wondering, in our very first conversation that you and I ever did, we started doing the normal things of catching each other up on, hey, give me your kind of career journey and how you, have arrived where you've arrived. And more importantly, what were pivotal things along the way that maybe changed the trajectory of your career. And I remember I'm going to put you on the spot, but you did a pretty eloquent 30-second elevator speech or so that just talked about your career and maybe more importantly, that kind of shift of what your mindset was as you entered your career and began to develop your business, and certainly the way that maybe that mindset has transformed and changed over the years. If you would, give our listeners a little bit about that mindset shift that you've had and kind of your 30-second career journey.
Yeah, I mean, it's probably, I don't remember how I summed it up so eloquently when we spoke, but, it feels like it's not a 30-second story. It's really, though, what you just said about the experience you had on my podcast is really what's kind of emerged for me, not just on the podcast, but my own life journey. I really think kind of looking at our entire lives and seeing these moments that in hindsight really have led us to where we are, so that we can heal, we can get into a adult self, like you said in the opening, create from our essence and really bring our fullest authentic self to what we do and what we're creating and how we work and how we function as parents and friends and everything else that we do. That's really been that mindset shift for me, where it was that I felt like I was kind of unconsciously doing what I thought I was supposed to do, which included be successful, make money, look good, do all the things that, I think a lot of society programs us to do. And I was just doing that. I was kind of living into this programming that I got in childhood, from society, from wherever else I picked it up. And the shift was really deciding I actually wanted to live into my own life that I authored, that wasn't about any programming. And then, that kind of set me on a whole path of discovery and learning and looking at, really tough stuff, to be able to then say, okay, now what do I want to create and how?
I have no doubt that there will be time in the near future, I'm not sure when, but where there will be power in congregating again, power in bringing your whole team together, your entire company and organization together in one space for that powerful keynote speech, that discussion that has to happen as a team, an entire organization about leadership and culture and mindset. But until then, we are in a virtual world, And so if I can add value to your team, your company, or organization through a virtual keynote speech, or just helping your team and organization have the conversation that's the currency for change that you need to be having internally, I hope you'll track us down and let us know how we can be helpful at jasonvbarger.com.
Yeah, absolutely. Which is, I mean, again, amazing that we didn't connect before we have. But I think one of the reasons why I enjoyed that conversation from the very first time that we met, and certainly every conversation we've had since, is, you were so honest too and open about the fact that, when you began in business, as many of us do and many people do, is this kind of drive for what you thought what you were supposed to be focused on, and so being successful, the image of how you looked, how much money you made, all of those things that what I kept hearing were so externally focused. And then the journey that you've done and the hard work really of really turning internally and thinking about, no, but what does it mean to be the author of your own life? And in the language that I would use is, what does it mean to set a different temperature for your own life, and what is within your control of how you want to show up in the world, and what kind of impact you want to have for the things that you want to do, but certainly for the culture of the people around you. So I've just appreciated that you've been on that journey, but you were also able to articulate that in a way that is a great example for anybody out there that maybe is feeling that pull. Do you remember when you began to feel that change in you?
Yeah, I do. And, I really honestly look at this as like, everything is perfect. Nothing is wrong. Nothing was wasted. So, I look back on all of it with tremendous gratitude, which is not to kind of skip over the difficulty of it, because, there is a lot there that is important to really be with so that you can get to gratitude. But specifically, there were a few things that happened within the last 15 years and really kind of all around the same time. I went to something called Landmark Forum, which, many people are familiar with. I got a coach, which at the time, 15 years ago, I thought coaching was a phrase that was reserved for sports. Didn't know what a coach was. I just knew I met this guy and he seemed like he could help me with something I didn't even really know what it was I needed help with. Felt very kind of spiritually aligned in a time when I wasn't spiritual at all. I kind of, fancied myself as an atheist back then. So, I didn't use that language, but that's kind of the best way I can describe it. And then I went to something called Summit Series, where I got to see that people were really on fire about their work in their life. It was a lot of young people, entrepreneurs, philanthropists, people that were up to really trying to do big things in the world. And those three events all happened within a few months of each other. And I, at the end of that, kind of got this, I'm on fire, I've got to make a change. And I just dug in and started really, doing the hard work.
Yeah. Well, and amazing to then see what comes of that. And then how that not only kind of breathes oxygen into you, but also begins to breathe oxygen into everything else that you're involved in and all the things that you've been, supporting and or a part of over the years is really great. I'm interested, that the past year certainly has been a time of so much uncertainty for people. There's been ambiguity. There's been, as I said in the opener, I mean, there's economic uncertainty and there's been political uncertainty. There's been civil unrest and these heavy issues of social justice and racial divide and even down to, where are you schooling your kids and all of those things that have been happening. But there's just been this layer, but I also think this pattern of growth that we are in the midst of that we're learning stuff. And I'm interested in your kind of, how have you been navigating yourself through this personally? And then thinking about, teams that you're a part of and certainly your organization and leading people in the times that we're in. What what habits have you been trying to lean on, and or the way that you're thinking? How has that impacted how you're navigating your way through all this?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I agree. You know, there's been a tremendous amount of challenge in the last year, and in all of the ways that you referenced. And you know, I have to acknowledge, kind of right out of the gate, that I'm very privileged.
Mm-hmm.
I am in a lot of ways isolated from a lot of the unrest in the world, in kind of every aspect, and I feel very fortunate for that. You know, that's really luck, from my standpoint. You know, I was born into this life, you know, and so I feel very fortunate for that. And yet, you know, I also feel like that work that I had been doing, and this is not to like pat myself on the back, but just to be honest and maybe kind of, you know, inspire others, that when you do the hard work over a long period of time, when the big challenge comes, you're much better prepared for it. And so that was like a lot of things. You know, we were very focused on market risk within the business, and we liquidated a lot of assets at the end of 2019. So, you know, we were not as exposed to potential issues. I had no idea a pandemic was happening, but we were concerned about just, you know, kind of inflation in our market. And really, you know, I had done a lot of work, as we talked about before we came on, to kind of clear my schedule and to build a team and to really do some things that allowed me to not be quite as busy or overwhelmed. And then, you know, I think no matter what your circumstances, and maybe, you know, this is incredibly hard for some people, and maybe it's even not possible for everybody. I'm willing to even acknowledge that it might not even be possible for some people, but I do think that you can choose to decide what you're going to do with everything. And, you know, my language is like, you can create anything. And what I decided to do very early on in the pandemic was I chose to create this year to be one of growth. And I really dug in and kind of doubled down on therapy and on, you know, self-improvement and on physical health and on being connected to my family and my children and my wife and my friends, and being of service to other people. And that really made this all feel very, very rewarding, and not without challenge. I mean, we've had our challenges along the way, and you know, despite the privilege, it's been difficult. But knowing that, you know, at the end of this time, I am not going to feel like it was wasted is a very good feeling.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you saying that, and the reason why I asked the question is I've been very fortunate to be, you know, having different guests on this podcast that come from all different angles of this, and certainly experiences in the world. But I think, you know, no matter where you are, and certainly you know, come from a place of privilege, absolutely, I do as well. And to be able to still acknowledge kind of what is it that we've been experiencing, and to hear the different perspectives from other people. You know, the language, at least, that I've been using all along is that conversations are the currency for change. And so trying to create environments where we are having conversations that are rooted in how can we bring our best to whatever the situation is and the challenges that are in front of us. And then, you know, what I'm hearing you say is make that active choice to, okay, well, what is it? What is within my control? Of all these things that are swirling in the world right now that are out of my control, what are the ones that are within my control? And what can I at least do today? I mean, on this podcast, I've had some wonderful conversations, and some challenging, wonderful conversations about the racial divide and about hurt that people are feeling, and with friends on this podcast. And again, of saying, well, what does it mean to just take one step closer to one another? And so, you know, conversations are the currency for change. And what I hear you saying is that kind of active choice of taking that step forward. I'm interested in, so I've been also talking about this idea that the term leadership has been hijacked. And what I mean is that we throw around the term leadership so loosely in the world. And certainly over the last few years, I think people in position of leadership across industries and places, that we throw around the term leadership, and yet the term itself has been hijacked. And so some of the work that I do with teams and organizations is helping to define, when we say leadership and we talk about authentic and compelling leadership, what are those attributes and what does that really look like in action and behavior in the world today? I'm wondering, when you think about not only the backdrop of just everything that we're experiencing right now, but when you think about that term leadership and kind of authenticity of leadership, are there traits or attributes that you've seen in others that you've experienced or that you recognize as, hey, this is an attribute and a characteristic of leadership that you're really drawn to?
Yeah, there are. And, there's not one in particular. What I have found, and I think I'm not entirely sure what you mean by it being hijacked, but maybe I do, which I think is just kind of like stereotypical, leadership being applied, too broadly. And what I think leadership can look like is really more comparable to authenticity, to courage, to really being standing for something, especially, if it's not selfish and it's a part of a bigger picture, whether that be your vision, your mission, your team, the environment, the world. I mean, any political, social issue. What I've found, and it's a funny thing, I gave this speech at the Columbus Chamber of Commerce in February of this year at their annual event, and I decided that the conference was focused on leveling up, and I decided to talk about my personal story, my journey, and that for me, in order to level up, I needed to go back and really look at what was running, and that included, trauma and other insecurities and behaviors that I needed to heal and fix before I could really, level up. And I found a lot of people saying that took, tremendous courage, and what a great display of leadership. And it's a funny thing. I wasn't thinking about being a leader. I wasn't thinking about, leadership at all. All I was doing was sharing something that I felt was important for me to share and that might mean something to other people. And I think that's maybe what you mean, that we, we're kind of making this too complicated or too loosely used, that let's get back to the basics. Let's get back to just being, good, kind, loving, courageous, strong, people. And that's leadership.
Yeah, no, absolutely. You the example you just shared, it paints a beautiful picture, because really, I mean, with teams and organization, we talk about flipping that paradigm, that part of that hijacking that really is kind of going back to this old model of leadership where at whatever point, and I similar to what you're saying is, I'm not sure it was ever true, but somehow, at least in our minds, we taught it this way, or we thought about it, that the leader was about being at the top of the pyramid, and the leader was the strong, dictator, general kind of position that would bark out orders and tell everybody what to do, always had the answers, was strong, never let them see you sweat, that kind of stuff. And yet what we have, of course, I think realized and or are still in the becoming more conscious too, is that true, authentic, and compelling leadership is not about being at the top of the pyramid, but it's actually flipping that paradigm in our own minds and in our own hearts upside down. And really the best are what you're describing is they, even if you are that person that's quote unquote at the top of the organizational pyramid or whatever it is in the community or a position you might hold, that truly the best don't see themselves that way, that they see that their mission as the leader is to serve something greater than themselves. and that paradigm in their own mind and their own heart, that leadership isn't about having all the answers, but it's about going on that journey. And it's being authentic and vulnerable and courageous, the way that it sounds like people were connecting to what you said. And so, you said that beautifully, even without me, kind of defining it, which is really, really cool.
Yeah.
I also want to just point out, because I'm interested in your thoughts on this too, just about developing teams and developing people, because as your business has grown, it's been more than just you, and there are other people that are involved, and certainly the projects and other, things that you're involved in require not just you being clear on what the vision is or what your mission is, but collaboration with other people and setting a collective temperature, again, to use language that I use, that requires kind of culture shaping. Some recent guests that I had on the podcast were organizational researchers from the University of Pennsylvania, Tamara Miles and Wesley Adams, that did this groundbreaking research around organizational psychology, and really studying companies in the world that what are the 10 principles, really was the research around the principles that created meaningful work for people. And they entered into this this study, and they're hilarious in telling this. We had this conversation about it, that they, were so fired up to dive into this research and study all these world-class organizations and companies that were doing this and were galvanizing people around meaningful work. And they thought they were going to discover this thing that had never been discovered before. And what they ended up finding, very affirming to kind of work I'm doing, and then the kind of work that you're involved with, is that it came up with these 10 principles that it's none of it is groundbreaking, but it is pointing us to the fact that people want purpose and want meaning, and they want to be a part of something that's greater than them, and that they are these kind of world-class organizations are bringing people into participation in co-creating the kind of culture of whatever that vision is and whatever that mission is that they're trying to be a part of in the world. And so in the midst of this, what they thought they were going to find, this thing that nobody ever had heard of or knew about, and what the reality of it is it's just pointing again to the best places are the ones that are committed to connecting and engaging the minds and hearts of people in very intentional and thoughtful ways along the way. I'm interested if that resonates with you and what you've seen across your experience, and certainly about kind of the teams that you've been a part of building and co-creating.
Yeah, it does. I mean, I think, it's an interesting thing that sometimes we just really make this way too complicated, and that, when I say we, I mean kind of like, as a society, and certainly in the business community. And I think as, you get into larger businesses, it's even more prevalent, older business, same thing, that you feel like you need some outside consultant to do some elaborate study to just tell you like that people need, basic human needs, right? That purpose is really important to people, belonging, being connected, feeling heard, being inspired, wanting to make a difference in the world, having passion. I mean, I don't think you need, an Ivy League, top tier consultant firm to tell you that. It's just that we don't want to accept it. We don't want to honestly, and again, I say we as a society, because I really strongly believe in purpose and all of these things, and have created my entire company around it. But a lot of people don't really want to validate it and to really honestly trust that there's tremendous value in it. And the ironic thing is that I actually think you can have much better results economically, and certainly more sustainable organizations over time. I actually am in the process of starting a venture capital fund that's aimed at holistically supporting entrepreneurs so that they don't have to sleep at their desk and that 8 out of 10 do not have to fail, and that, unicorns are not the way forward, that I think we can create better economic results and much healthier, happier human beings and organizations that are sustainable over time by focusing on purpose and support and giving people tools to succeed, including mental health, including, making sure people are getting proper sleep and nutrition and have time to be with their families and loved ones. I think this drives better performance. And I've heard it kind of said, a few ways. But one of the things that I really like as it pertains to kind of, organizational behavior is that management, I think, is a dated mindset, that it's really about coaching, that you don't need to manage people. If you've got good people, you need to coach them and mostly be there to support them. It's kind of the same for parenting. It's not really that helpful for me to impart all of my wisdom and manage my kids, right? What they really need is for me just to be there for them, to support them, to love them, to answer questions when they have them, right? To me, that's kind of what I think we need to be doing. Again, not just like in some kind of, woo-woo, love is all that matters, which I believe, but like, I think this drives better results.
No, absolutely. And that's the heart of their study. I mean, Tamara and Wesley would tell you exactly that. Again, they thought they were going to, or they're not just thought, but they were excited to, were they going to turn over some stone that had never been turned over, the secret sauce of all these amazing organizations and companies that were creating these cultures where meaningful work was alive and breathing. And what they figured out is exactly what you're describing, and is exactly what I talk about in thermostat cultures. And it's the work that we're doing is that the reality is no, and in fact, they are productivity kind of consultants and experts. And part of that word productivity is they realize that as they study these organizations, they're becoming more productive because where they're putting their focus, their attention, and their heart is more directly aligned with the things that you just named, the purpose, the coaching, the clarity around mission and vision, the attracting the people that want to be a part of that, the developing of the whole person and helping them think about their mental health and how they are at work and how they engage their strengths and in this mission that's greater than them. All of this, that gets their greatest energy and their greatest focus, rather than, I've talked about at different times, the kind of busyness versus effectiveness of then rather this kind of rat race of organizations running and just accomplishing tasks, but aren't spending their time on the most important tasks. And so the research that they've done actually validates what you just said and is saying, no, if you want which again, none of it, as you pointed out, none of it's rocket science. And we really shouldn't have to rely on outside consultants to tell us this. However, the research then just reaffirms us back to, this is, if we invest in this time of our time, our focus, our energy, our heart, that absolutely better results come.
Yeah. The problem with the research is that it's just data. And even if the data is 100% accurate, you need buy-in. And buy-in has to be like a fully embodied belief from the top of the system and all the way down for this research to be impactful, meaningful, helpful at all. Right. No. And so that's where I think a lot of people miss, is they're like, hire the consultant, tell me what to do. But, if they don't like what they hear.
I would even stop you right there. I would say that's the problem, is that it's not, if the relationship, tell me what to do, rather than entering into a relationship, say, how are we going to develop this? That's back to that coaching mindset and that development of no. It isn't about someone coming in and telling you what to do or barking out orders, or it's about going on that journey and saying, is this what we are truly going to live and breathe internally? And that buy-in that has to come.
Yeah. And I guess I think what I like to try to highlight for people is, everything that we're doing organizationally, none of it comes from sophisticated education or third-party consultants, or even from reading books. It's all intuitive. It's all about kind of first working on yourself and making yourself kind of the best version of you can. And then it's so much easier just to act, because you don't have to really think. Everything I do feels very elementary to me. It feels very unsophisticated. It just feels right to me, and so it's kind of a natural just way of functioning. When there's an issue, I don't really have to kind of think it through, because I just know in my heart what's right. And then you just do it, and the more you kind of see that work, the more you just multiply it. And so that's kind of my, point on all this is, the more you can work on yourself, the better you're going to show up in your work, the more you're going to be able to, have a culture of purpose and meaning and passion and everything else.
Absolutely. And that's where what I see not only the individual leaders, so us individually, but the collective conversations that are the currency for change that are growing throughout teams and organizations. Again, you're right. It's just data points. But as we start to look at it, the places that are entering into that kind of thinking and development personally, but then also a collective mindset to be able to then be able to articulate, not in some kind of theory kind of way or, overly complex way, but to begin to do the work, much like it sounds like you've done for your own life, but to do it collectively as a team and say, yeah, well, what is it that we really want to be a part of creating in the world? Mm-hmm. And what are the values of how we want to show up and how we want to do that together? And none of it's rocket science, but it does take work and kind of intentionality and consciousness around what is that. And then once you've found that, which again, once you have that understanding and alignment within the team around that, you're right. I don't think it's things that feel, if they're out of alignment, they feel out of alignment very quickly. And if they feel in alignment, then the obvious thing is, how do we respond with action? But it's that kind of undercurrent of, are we willing to go on that journey of growth individually? But then also, I think that, in my opinion, the best teams and organizations in the world are the ones, much like what you're describing about for your company, is you're on this journey to discover what are we about and how do we begin, how do we unlock that, and let's simplify it and make sure that spirit is driving our action.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's this, thing that it's so simple, it really is so simple, yet it's so hard.
No doubt.
And in the hard is a lot of complexity. So, that's kind of the paradox, that in a lot of ways we're talking about really, really simple, basic stuff, but it is very hard for people. It's been very hard for me, and it remains, hard for me, but that's the work. And, the more we can kind of come back and just do what we know we need to do over and over again, the easier it gets.
Yep. The rinse and repeat, coming back to that rinse and repeat of making sure that we're staying in that. And the researchers, at least the two that I was referencing, they would say, one of the reasons, why, again, their research just helps point us back to that reaffirmation that for whatever reason, there are people that really need the data. And even though this stuff seems intuitive to us or something that seems that way, to your very point, it might be simple, but it's not easy. And somehow we get off track easily and spend all our time and focus and energy spinning our wheels in another direction rather than getting back to those true conversations that are the currency for change.
Yeah.
Buddy, this has been great. I appreciate you taking the time to be with me. We're about at our time, but I could talk about this for hours. But I always enjoy every time we get a chance to chat, and I look forward to our next one already. But I just want to say thank you for coming on the pod and sharing some of your wisdom.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Thanks, Jason. I really enjoyed it, and I love what you're doing. And it's really great to be connected and supporting each other. And you're speaking my language, and, it's so important to get these themes out. And so, really thank you for having me on. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you, buddy. Thanks for everything you're doing in the world and the person that you are and the way that you think about everything you're doing. I'm again, the reason for this podcast, I'm more convinced of this than ever, that not only everything that's happening in the world right now, but for all times that, for us to be able to take a step back and to take a deep breath and to think about, well, who is it that we're trying to be in the world, and try to engage our minds and hearts and, okay, well, what is that choice and how do we stay in alignment with that person, that temperature that we want to set individually, but then also collectively within our teams and organizations, that as we're more thoughtful about that and then able to, respond with action in alignment with those values that we have and for that temperature that we're trying to set, when we have clarity, we find solutions better for ourselves personally, but certainly collectively as teams and organizations. So thanks to everybody out there for listening to another chat. I hope this was a great point in your week, gave you something to think about, step back, think about, engage your mind and heart. And again, I hope you'll stay tuned at Jason V. Barger on social media and continue to stay around because more conversations are coming. And good luck wherever you are on the next step of your journey. Take care.
Thank you for listening to today's podcast, and I hope the messages and questions stimulate positive change along your path. As always, if these messages resonate with you and add value to your life, I hope you'll help amplify them throughout the world. Please rate, comment, and share on whatever podcast or social media platform you're using. And share this podcast with the people in your life or work who should be part of these conversations. That way, this spirit does, in fact, spread. If these messages or developing leaders and culture would be helpful to your organization, or you have a question or comment about this podcast, please contact us at jasonvbarger.com. And remember, we all are ambassadors for the culture we want to create in our life and work. We have to own the vision we want to be a part of. The future of leadership is you, is me, is us. Be a thermostat.